and it is Tuesday, March 5th. We are having our Checkly webinar. We've got Leon here. Let me go ahead and get some nice fun title slides up. This is putatively called what Datadog won't tell you, or Beyond APM. And you probably recognize me. I'm Noshinika, but let's introduce our guest. Oh, you know me, I'm Noshinika. I put my slide first. Oh no, that was such a vanity act. You know me, you find me at Check the HQ. You can find me everywhere, Serverless Mom. But let's have our guest, Leon, introduce himself. Leon, take the stage.
There's nothing more to say. I'm a middle-aged white dude spewing opinions on a webinar.
Uh-huh.
For
Well,
a
you don't
change.
have the Shure SMB 73, so you're not fully
No, I
over
don't.
to
And
complete podcast idiot, right?
that's true. And I'm not eating the microphone.
Oh God.
So yeah, it's right, exactly. So I've been working in tech for 35 years. Yes, I'm old. For those people who need a reference point, I started in IT when Windows came for free on 12 5.25-inch floppies. It came for free when you bought a copy of Excel 1.0, which no one did because we were still using Lotus 123. So that's me. I've been working in monitoring and observability for about 25 of those 35 years. And then of those 25 years, 10 years has been spent as a whatever you want to call it, technical evangelist or developer relations advocate or head geek or whatever. I'll call myself anything, pantless weasel, it doesn't matter. And in that time, I've used a lot of monitoring and observability tools, from Tivoli and OpenView and janky Perl scripts, which is basically still Tivoli, to, SolarWinds and Nagios and janky Python scripts. And I'm currently at Kentik, which is a network observability company, which we'll talk about more. I picked that picture so that you would have real confidence that I knew what the hell I'm talking about, right? It just reinforces the idea that I'm an expert. But you can find me as Leon Adato on almost all social media. So if you want to reach out, that's fine. You can also, I didn't put it on there, but adatosystems.com is my personal blog where I pontificate on so many things.
Well, and you're watching this on YouTube after the fact, there'll be a link down below in the description, both to Data Systems and to Kentik, which hopefully y'all have heard of. But that is part of the idea here, is that we want to talk about that a little bit. I think where I was really coming from on this, I think you lead into it well. We talk about, like, hey, you could do monitoring with a Python script. So I asked on Reddit a couple of weeks ago, I said, hey, where do you look first when, for example, someone tells you, hey, do you think that the site is down right now? Like, some people, of course, because they're technical people, they needed a more detailed scenario. So I was like, a salesperson who you trust, a salesperson who is not running their personal hotspot while on a plane in flight, right, or trying to get on the hotel lobby Wi-Fi, says, "Hey, is production down?" Where is the first place you check? Now,
Yeah.
the answers that I got back, everybody said, well, it's obvious where you check. Okay, it's here. And then they all gave a different answer. They all came back with a completely different, here's the place that I check. And it ranged from, I check, my Datadog, I check my CoreLogix dashboard. But that was, I mean, I should do a pie chart. I should go study and do a pie chart with anecdotal, but still, that was 10, 15% of responses. Another big chunk is, I just check the logs. That's, of course, where you always check. I go look at the site. I go get off the office Wi-Fi and I go look at the site, right? And another big group is, I have a little Python script that goes and pings the site. And, I click through to see, like, is this person asking for help debugging their Wix config? Like, they run two sites and they have a little Python script, and it's like, oh, cool, cottage industry, cottage prices, fantastic. No, that was, people running enterprise services, people who are tasked with very, very big projects. The number of people for whom, like, an APM single pane of glass dashboard is the way that they know their services up and down, is in the, like, 10-20% range.
Yeah.
So if you feel like I'm alone in the wilderness because I'm the only one who's not doing this very, very high touch observability, I don't have all this instrumentation and a million points in my application code, you are completely not alone. You are about 50% of all shops, including very high performance shops. They say, oh, well, we just have something we rolled in house, and that's what we use. So
You are normal. You are enough. You can
yeah,
do it.
yeah. This is absolutely, you are not way out in the wilderness of
In
what.
the bell curve.
Yeah. So, I want to talk a little bit about acceptable failures. So this is, of course, I follow the roofing subreddit, and one of the most common posts is like, how much time do you think is left in this roof? And this one is a joke post where someone is asking, hey, how long do you think this roof can go? Another couple of years while it just has a massive hole in it. And there's a slide that I didn't put into this, but it's a quote that I absolutely love, which actually just came up in this same like a similar like Reddit discussion thread about frequency of pinging, where someone says, if you are not monitoring appropriate to your SLA, you are setting yourself up to failure. Right? That if you are not tracking closely enough to actually see that this problem is happening fast enough to actually fix it, then your SLA is always going to get missed. And that's almost just definitional, right? But it is a little bit like, hey, how long does this roof have left? It's got a hole in it, right? That like, if you say, hey, for example, when we get into network monitoring, if you say, well, we don't actually track that at all, then you are just saying, hey, sometimes the site is going to go down because of DNS failures, because of network misconfigs, and that's okay. That's not a big deal. We don't want to prevent that. We're just going to let that happen sometimes, right?
Well, and just to clarify, not only do we not want to prevent it, we don't want to know about it until the users tell us about it. And that becomes what I euphemistically call an SLM, a service level mirage.
Yeah.
Like it's like we're going to say that we care about it, but we're not going to actually do anything that indicates we care about it. And so we kind of don't.
Yeah. And so, what's funny is that's more interesting than what I actually have on the next slide. So I'm going to talk about we're going to talk about this for a minute, which is this thing of, when you talk about, hey, what do you check first when the site is down? So I think the people who had the most, what I would consider to be correct response is that is not a frequent experience that I have, which is it's not frequent that even just someone in the org, but sort of outside of operations, outside of the product side, is the person who's telling me. That's not an experience I frequently have. It's very unusual to get that reported by user, when in fact a lot of other people, they're like, I'm such a great operation, we do such great operations that when a user tells us that the service is down, we fix it really fast, which is a very, very different, like that's essentially saying, well, I don't have monitoring, people just tell me when it's broken.
All right, so I just want to jump in here for a second, because when you take a monitoring maturity exam or whatever, there's a bunch of them out there. They're typically, a set of questions that results in a graph that basically says some version of you suck and buy our stuff and suck less.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's like it, where, and it's like this bar chart, right? Like you're better, you're best, or whatever, that kind of thing. And I find that monitoring maturity is much better described as a radiograph or a spider chart. It's almost like a dating profile, where it's like, well, you have really bad alerting, but your staff is really solid and they know what they're doing, and therefore when the problem happens, they're on top of it really fast because they already know what to do. You do katas, or you just have institutional knowledge, or even really good documentation, or whatever it is. On the other hand, maybe you have really good dashboards, or you have bad dashboards, but you have really good alerting. So you don't need dashboards because the system tells you, or, but it's not like this straight line graph of or this way, from crappy to really awesome. It's actually this mess or mixture of, these character traits of your observability make up for the fact that you're weak over here, and therefore you're generally okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think a shop where a support engineer can log into their, CoreLogic's dashboard, say, oh, I see what's going on, is like, the load balancer is flapping. I'll go ahead and put in a request for that to get restarted. Just for anybody in the technical org can figure out this problem from a fantastic, again, single pane of glass dashboard. That's one org. The other org is where there's 2 or 3 people who can really fix this. They go in and look at logs. A lot of people are entering logs. I'm like, hey, you have 50,000 users, right? So how on earth are logs going to help, right? You're looking at, you literally said, hey, what's going on in this parade down, Main Street? And you went and looked at 1 square inch of the street and you said, oh, I think I know what's going on. Both of those shops might fix problems fairly fast, but they have completely different strengths and weaknesses, right? One had the information super concentrated. They're able to use very cheap, very, very fast tools. And that, their people are those few people are so smart and so well educated that they can assume what's going on in the whole system. Fantastic, right? The other side is like, hey, we did all this work to educate the whole team, to give everybody access and make these great summary dashboards. So yeah, literally anybody who has any technical background at all can figure out what's going on really quick. Amazing, right? Those people might have similar like Dora metrics or similar mean times to resolution. Made the right plural there, but yeah, they're actually really in a completely different place as what their strengths are. So super quick, this next slide was like, what's the stuff that's like missing from APM? What's the stuff that's missing from a common, experience on your New Relic or your Datadog? And so like one, right, integrating open source observability can be very, very tough on these tools. Okay, interesting. Kubernetes monitoring is often there, but not to the extent that we expect to do. And that's sort of the case for a lot of these things, right? Including network monitoring, right? That like one of the things you always get whenever you discuss the limitations of a very big tool is someone's like, well, no, they released that in 2013. They have look, there's a press release from 2013 and no updates since that they've ever added any features to it, but they did have it at that time. And you're like,
we have network monitoring, which means like you ping shit.
Yeah, and I completely like one of the things about I wrote this piece, which I think I have linked here, maybe not, about the single pane of glass thinking and why it can be kind of thin is that one of the things is it is about box ticking, is it feels often like, hey, we're doing some kind of monitoring, and then when you actually get into a crisis, it's like, oh yeah, this monitoring completely misses this fail state. This monitoring looks green when in fact no one is able to make a single request. It's like, okay, the fact that you announced at some point that you have the feature does not necessarily say that it's there.
Right.
But
I can wax philosophic on network monitoring for a really long time. It's kind of my job.
Yeah.
Oh,
look what I have. I have notes up. Look, boom.
Look at that. Let's talk about it for a second. So I just want to, because I've been doing this for a while, in terms of network and sort of infrastructure monitoring. When I say infrastructure, capital I, routers and switches, and then everything on top of it. By the way, when we say Kubernetes, there's a thing in there, IP tables, that's a router. So you still have network monitoring inside Kubernetes. But anyway, if with the whole 4 pillars of observability, 3 pillars of observability, 10 pillars, whatever pillars, with metrics, events, logs, and traces, or MELT, network typically cares about the metrics, events, and logs. So the metrics is pretty easy to understand. It's the SNMP metrics, the ping metrics, the API derived metrics. You're going to get those. Events and logs tend to look about the same. You've got SNMP traps. You also have syslog messages. Those are all sort of event-like things. And then you have flow, which a lot of people tend to overlook. No, I'm not talking about the lady from Progressive. I'm talking about like NetFlow and JFlow and SFlow and VPC flow logs and stuff like that. If you can get metrics from a network that says I'm passing a gigabit of traffic per minute, Flow breaks it down and says within that gigabit per minute, second, whatever, within that gigabit of traffic, I see 10 megabits going from this source to this destination in an ongoing conversation. Now, that source and destination might be Albert in accounting who is binging Netflix, or it might be database traffic, or it might be authentication traffic. You don't know, but it's going to tell you what kind of traffic is within that full block. And that can be really, really useful to understand the nature, both what's right, what's wrong, and also what's different. And that's another aspect of monitoring overall, but certainly network monitoring, is that it's not about a particular point in time. The network, it's up, it's down, it's running heavy, it's not running heavy. But what I want to know is it normal? Meaning, is it different than it normally is for this day of the week, for this time of the month, for this, season of the year? Is it, and that is where monitoring with baselining really shows its strength.
Yeah, this is one of the wildest things to me is anytime someone talks about, any kind of AI enabled thing, I'm like, I'm not that excited about that. But what, back in the late 90s when I was first being exposed to like a language model system, its ability to like summarize, hey, there is a trend, was super impressive. And something I read a little more about is like, hey, most monitoring is not effective in terms of this is what is happening currently in this instant, right? Like that in general is not going to be that useful to you. What you actually want to know is, hey, what has been happening? What is normal for a Tuesday? Right. And it can be quite tough to get a sense for that. It's often where the experience of our engineers takes the place of the tool's ability to tell you anything about that. And
Well, yeah.
yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, and that's where the dividing line between, I'll say, old school traditional monitoring and new wave observability. Like when you want to say what's the difference between those two things, and I'm going to say this with full respect for everyone who lost their mind and stomach lining during the observability flame wars on Twitter over the
Mhm.
last 5 years. I'm not trying to like boil it down, but one of the aspects is that monitoring tends to deal with domain specific signals, meaning that storage looks very different than network, which looks very different than server traffic, versus the four golden signals, right? But it also deals with a metric aston that is a very technical measurement. I will define it later online if you need me to. A metric aston of data that one human can't reason about. And that's where machine learning and okay, AI, which we all know is a BS marketing term for 3 if statements in a trench coat, but those 3 if statements in a trench coat are doing a good job of taking all that data coming from multiple different places, I mean, terabytes of data, and saying, hey, wait, this particular profile of it looks weird. Maybe you want to look at that. Going back to network monitoring for a minute, I do want to point out that streaming telemetry, which is sort of open telemetry's cousin twice removed. Cisco took the ideas of OpenTelemetry and said, we're going to make it work on network devices if you pay us for the new ones and stuff like that. But streaming telemetry is now supported on a lot of network devices, and it provides much more granular, much more real-time data than the metrics and events that you're used to. I mean, down to the second, without having the observer bias of metric collection that we've seen in the past. So what I mean by observer bias is that if I ping something hard enough, I stop pinging and I start DDoS attacking it, right? Same
Yeah.
thing, just it's a matter of scale and degree. So
But
better
yeah,
is
trying to
when
keep a very close eye on a system that should be streaming events or even streaming data directly by frame. Yeah, trying to keep too close an eye of it directly is going to start to bring it down and affect its performance.
right, because you have to keep asking, how you doing? How you doing? How you doing? But with streaming telemetry, it's outbound communication, and therefore it can be incredibly granular in the same way that open telemetry is different than, say, again, API collection or something like that in that exact same way. So it's worth
Mm-hmm.
knowing. And the last bullet point is probably the most important. Back to Nika, your point about you're okay, you're enough, you're within the bell curve. What we're talking about with all these techniques and technologies is not an either or. Do ours or it's gonna be, no, it's both and. It is all of these things, and it's whatever works best for your specific use cases. And anyone who tries to tell you that our tool is the best and don't use anyone else's, to sort of misquote Princess Bride, is trying to sell you something, Your Highness.
Yeah, I think a pretty straightforward example that you have to understand pretty quickly is like, hey, the difference in a shop where a solutions engineer who's a perfectly smart, lady who works on your team is able to go in and say, hey, I know what's going on with the system right now. And one where, oh, you gotta wake Alice up. She's the only this one ops engineer is able to fix this. That is, that is not going to be encapsulated in which tool you bought, right? That has a
Right.
ton to do with what your team is, what its setup is, where it's located. All these things are going to play
Yeah.
a much bigger role in how quickly you solve problems and how quickly you resolve incidents than, oh, hey, we bought this one tool and that was the solution to that. We're getting up on time, so I actually want to make sure we have time for Kentik demo. So if it's okay to like completely try to sabotage you on stage and be like, now do the last dance, now do the overture, go back
Not a problem.
to
I
the
can
A,
always do
third
that.
position, go. Right. But yeah, if you don't mind, let's hop into a little Kentik demo. If you
Okay.
want to start sharing your screen, I will stop.
Yep.
Oh boy, Zoom and its extremely odd views about what counts as a stream. Also, stop share. I believe I have to hit stop share first.
There we
We shall
go.
see.
And we're going to see if I share my correct screen. Uh, let's see here. I'm going to guess. Uh, let's see. Do you see the network, the Explorer? No, you don't.
Nope.
Okay. I shared the wrong one. This is great.
That was a
First of
nice
all,
plug for my blog post. Why the single pane of glass is
yeah,
impossible.
You may notice that I have several screens behind me. This is what it looks like when a 56-year-old man had attention deficit in school, and this is how he learned how to deal with it. Um,
I personally go for the
so
one big screen. So if I ever share my screen, it becomes incredibly impossible to see because it's one
I keep thinking about
65-inch
getting like one
screen.
of those 48-inch screens, but well,
Yeah.
money, and my kids like to eat 3 meals a day, and so I have to prioritize.
I will say
Okay,
I stuck with the smart TV, which is what I am currently using. It's just a television. Works fine. Works fine.
so my 21-year-old is doing that, and I'm not quite sold on it. Anyway, sorry. But we digress. Once again,
Yeah.
attention deficit people on a webinar. So I started here. This is part of Kentik. You get there by portal.kentik.com. I started here because this is what people typically think of when they think of a network monitoring tool. Is it a list of devices? And, if I dive into one of these devices, and I just love me my tabs, is I can see some information about, the data of that device. Once again, the ongoing regular collection of data, that's monitoring. That's what it is. So I can see the ASNs. Remember that Kentik is a network observability company that has its roots in providers, but it also has plenty of tools for regular enterprise users. But we do tend to put provider information like ASNs first, but we can also see which applications are passing traffic through because, again, Kentik is also very much based in flow. Therefore, naturally built into this is that I can tell the application traffic, whether it's something simple like HTTPS or BGP, or I can say that, oh, it's the chef server application, whatever that is, or countries and so on and so forth. But I can customize this to show even more information, whether it's, what AWS region this information is coming from, or what cities and so on and so forth. That's what people think of when they think of a network monitoring tool. What needs to be clear, though, is that, GCP has flow. So does Azure, so does AWS. Gosh darn it, so does IBM and Oracle.
Hmm.
They all have that so that I can dive into, if I want to, the GCP environment. And now I can look at the different data and metrics and experiences that are coming out of my GCP or my Amazon or my Azure environment that's coming through. But that's not all. I can also get into, we just released not that long ago, NMS, because naming things is hard, network monitoring system. And this is for enterprise users, something that you're probably more used to seeing. This gives you a much more device-centric view of your information, so that if I dive into that particular device, I can see, first of all, what kind of device it is and the details of it. Come on, baby, you can do it. Oh, it's live demo time. I did
Always
not
on the sales
necessarily
demo.
didn't make a sacrifice to the demo gods. We're going to see if this one comes out. Let's see if I switch screens, if that'll
This
help.
was I was writing about like the
There we
cost
go.
of a downtime and how um you can have leaders come in and say, hey, the cost of downtime is infinity because the last downtime was during this
Right.
presentation. So therefore, 2 minutes of downtime or 2 minutes of latency, it was worth $1 million because we were on $1 million sales call. It's like,
Right.
well, David, I think maybe you shouldn't have used that disrespectful language during the demo as well, and maybe that's why we lost the sale, not the 30 seconds that it was
Not the 30
spinning.
seconds of downtime. Although I will say, you hit on something that I want to just for a moment, non sequitur, but I want to just take a side note, which is there's down and there's slow. And I will
Mm-hmm.
say, I have said for a long time, slow is the new broke. Slow is
Mm-hmm.
down. If it takes too long, it's effectively down. And we need to be aware of that also, that the performance of something, even if it's 50% of what it usually is, once again, we're back to that baseline,
Yeah.
is just as bad as not available at all in some cases.
No, something I talk
So
about all the
yeah,
time at Checkly is you can go to a site and I feel that you can find out what kind of monitoring they have by visiting that site. If you go there, you go to login.service.com, it's up, right? The page is up, ready to go. Okay, let me go ahead and just type in my email address and it's going to check if that's a valid user before I even put in my password. And that just show very very slow. Let's go ahead and log in, and that's just so there is somebody right now patting themselves on the back like our first paint is so fast. It's so fast. It's not even a problem. It's served on a CDN. It's not a problem. It's like, okay, but the actual service, the backend service is super slow. Doesn't matter because we measure only that first paint and we don't worry about these other pieces. Like, yeah, that's very,
Right.
very observable, which is why both network monitoring and something like Checkly, which is you can go in and simulate with Playwright the actual login process of doing
Synthetics.
something
Yeah.
on the site
Yeah.
and find out how slow that is.
Right. There's three things. One is like your metrics and your like what is the status of all your stuff? Once again, right now, but also across time and what's normal and when am I running out of resources? Then there's synthetics where it's at 2 o'clock in the morning, no one's on the system, but I know that a particular from here to here, whatever, if the login bone is connected to the first paint bone, which is connected to the account screen bone or whatever it is, that's slow. No one's on it, but you need to fix it before 9 a.m. when people start jumping on the system. And the last one is real user experience. The users are actually over here right now and they're experiencing, and once again, both and. It's all those things need to be accounted for, not just one or the other. To your point. So as I've been clicking around here, right, this is pretty traditional network information. You see your interfaces. I can actually dive into a specific interface and see the utilization. I think, I hope, eventually, you get the idea. There we go. I can see, how it's been going across time. I can see the different components. Again, even though we say it's network monitoring, you can see the elements that make up these things. And I'm sorry, people who are like, oh, well, who cares about a fan? You have obviously never had a fan go out, the temperature rise, and the entire thing just ab ends or dies. Or,
Yeah. Yeah.
you, again, monitoring versus observability. If observability is focused on the unknown unknowns, I don't know what might break and I have no idea when. Monitoring is focused on the known unknowns. I know this shit can break. I just don't know when. And I'm here to tell you that fans die, disks fill, screws fall out. It's an imperfect world, said
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Bender in the Breakfast Club. So you have to account for all those things at the same time. And that is part of what Kentik is, there to help out with. Now, it does a lot of other stuff. For example, we were talking about Kubernetes, right? So Kentik Kubernetes is actually monitoring let's see here. There we go. It's here to help monitor Kubernetes containers. Let me go back here and go to, there we go, AWS traffic flow. And let's see if I can walk the demo correctly. So again, this is all mostly flow based, but you're getting interesting visualizations of how the traffic is moving through your Amazon environment, along the way. So you can see how this is all going. We're running close on time, so I don't want to get bogged down. But the idea that Kubernetes is network monitoring also. So we show you that along with the application traffic that's moving in and out. All of these things matter. And these are all things that Kentik is available. We do have some synthetics. I just mentioned that, but I know that that's a thing. Also, because providers are a large part of our customer base, we're able to give insight into DDoS attacks that are happening on the internet right now and whether or not they're touching your network. Same thing for botnets. It's both, we see this botnet activity because so many of our customers are service providers, so we are able to report that in an anonymized way, but also we're able to tell you where that behavior overlaps with your network. So these are all valuable elements of the Kentik system. So that's a quick demo.
I
If there's
love
something else
that.
you want to see, let me know.
No, I think this covers it really well. And I think that our current Checkly users are really going to see the connection to their own work, which is it is, of course, it starts with, hey, are we up or down? Are we available or not available? But it moves very quickly into, is the complete system functional, right? And that
Right.
means how is it performing and what are the general indicators that we have something going wrong? And so that just seems very, very powerful to say, we want to go a lot deeper than just, hey, are we up or down? Hey, what's our performance on this
Right.
main page? That doing something like and automated testing, but actually monitoring because you're doing it all the time with
Mhm.
Checkly is closely connected to keeping an eye on what your actual performance is from the network layer.
It's also worth pointing out that Kentik has a full bi-directional API. Our goal is to play well with others. So we do not believe, and we're not going to try to tell you we're the center of the universe and all you need is us, because that's a lie. What we're going to say is that we do what we do incredibly well, and then we share that information either inbound or outbound with other tools so that you can get your work done. Because again, speaking as somebody who's been in tech for 35 years, there is no such thing as a heterogeneous, a single tool solution. You're going to have multiple tools, and if they don't play well, you end up with what I affectionately call swivel chair integration, where you sit there with multiple screens like I have, just swinging your head back and forth, trying to put all the information together in your head.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You're right. We are coming up on time. So I want to give a couple of closing comments, and we're going to have you back to talk about alerting and alerting structuring.
I
Because
would love to.
it's the other area that Checkley's very into and also is really big with, I know with network monitoring as well, where Checkley does things like visual regression testing, but you really have to think about your alerting in those cases, right? The fact that
Yeah.
a few pixels don't match could mean a lot of things. So you want to think about how your alerting is working. And again, of course, with networks on PC, like, oh my God, things are wrong. No, we just moved that routing. That's fine. That's not a problem. Oh my God, something's wrong. No, it's just the Super Bowl and we're playing our ad. So that's what's going on. Please don't wake me up for that.
Right.
Final thoughts. I would love people to check out, Broken Windows, Why the Single Pane of Glass is Impossible, which sadly someone else had already taken Single Pane PAIN of Glass. So I couldn't have that as the title. But we do talk in that a little bit about how some of these goals do not match up, how the vision of the Star Trek computer is not quite possible yet, where we always get a good summary from an automated system, and it always is able to say shields at 35% and not stuff like shield connection 221 is down. This stuff matters as you think about how you're going to handle real problems. As you look about, I think that one of the things I would leave people with is think about the last like 5 incidents you had and think about where they started and think about maybe when your kind of 5 whys or whatever stopped, and that may be the area where you want your monitoring to expand. So I think for a lot of people, this is why Kentik is always on my mind, is what was this network thing? Oh, okay. It was, misconfiguration or failure of this network component. So therefore, we don't need to look into that because, we monitor our application code. We monitor this, we monitor that. Well, okay. Oh yeah. Well, that one's always going to be a zebra. We're never going to find that one. So think about that a little bit. Think about those last few events and what you might do. Leon, I'll ask you, what is the one thing you would want people to do to improve their observability stance? Observability stance. There you go.
Okay, so I would say go back to the tickets, go back to the incidents that you're having and see where in there are the kernels of the things you can improve. The things that are happening repeatedly, the things that are happening with the biggest impact, look at those and really start there. That's where your low-hanging fruit. And if you do it well, then the people that you're helping will automatically start to tell you about other opportunities that you
Mm-hmm.
have. And you grow from this base of, I want to fix actual problems. I don't want to implement theoretical tools. So start there and grow outward. Eventually you'll hit the edges of that circle. You'll hit the, you'll find the edge where there's no more problems. You know what? Take a vacation, take some time, just, water your flowers, take your successes, and then you can look at, well, wouldn't it be better if we could do, then you can do that other stuff. That would be the most important thing. After that, I would say, go read, Nika's blog, read my blog, because we have lots of ideas of things to try.
Yeah, things are trying to go a little bit deeper. But folks, that's been our time, or most of our time. We're going to have Leon back soon to talk about alerting structure. The Q&A is open. We didn't see questions come in, but if you have them, feel free to drop them as a comment to the recorded video down below, because you're definitely watching this on YouTube. Hey, if you're using LinkedIn as a video platform, God love you. And so leave a comment on the LinkedIn video, and we'll do that as well. The weirdest one for me is how well LinkedIn does is live video. So I bet our next chat will be like streaming to LinkedIn live. Isn't that wild?
With monitoring data to show what it looks like.
We can
That'll be good.
find Leon over at Adato Systems. You can find me everywhere as Serverless Mom. You can find Leon at Leon Adato. Most places, certainly on Twitter.